All right, Steve. So at that moment when your baby was born and you realized there could be potential brain damage, how did you and Jess respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Eric. So, when you hear those words, it's really overwhelming. I guess the first thing is time stands still.
Yeah, I bet.
Just for a moment, time stands still, and you have a million thoughts, no exaggeration, a million thoughts flash through your mind. But it's overwhelming, gut wrenching, fear.
Yeah.
When the consultants, are concerned about potential brain damage, but more importantly, they say that there is an intervention, but they need to start immediately, needs to be done within 6 hours of birth. Hey, and the clock's already ticking. We're already 4 hours in when the consultants came to us with that.
Amazing. All right. Well, we're going to get more into that in a moment. But first,
hello, I'm Steve.
I'm Eric. And together we are two dads with one mission.
So welcome to the Allied Dads podcast. This is the show for dads, all about fatherhood, faith, and freedom. One conversation at a time.
And on this episode, the question is, have you ever had your faith challenged by the circumstances of life?
So let me share with you, the real life situation that challenged my own faith recently. And it's my hope that something will either resonate with you or you'll get some value as you're listening, perhaps some insight that can assist you with your own thinking on faith. And that's really my hope for you today.
Yeah.
So let me just take you back. It's a normal Sunday afternoon. My wife, Jess, she's 40 weeks pregnant. Baby's growth scans have all gone well, but we're in for a scheduled, straightforward induction. And during that induction process, things are not moving as fast as we would hope. And we've done our research, and Jess, and in communication with myself, we were pretty adamant that we didn't want to go down, which is known as, certainly here in the UK and Europe, I'm guessing it's very similar over stateside and in other areas of the world. It's literally called, the 𝗪𝗲𝗃. But what the drip is they pump a synthetic version of oxytocin, which is the hormone associated with getting the labor process and the contraction started. Gotcha. And we didn't want that for our own reasons, which I'm not going to go into, in this. So,
but it's one of those decisions that parents have to make, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a decision, and there were numerous pros and cons, but more cons and more against in our view, which like I say, I won't go into because we're getting into technical science there.
Right, but I think at some point you're gonna tell us how that actually turned out to be a really great thing.
Yeah, indeed. So we basically had the consultant who was about to, in fact, the consultant came and said, okay, so we're going to get you hooked up to a drip. And Jess said, no, you're not, because it's her body, her choice. It's almost like people are pushed into this type of an induction, and that's the next step, and there's nothing you can do. So, we made the decision that wasn't right for us for our own reasons, and we sought alternatives. Unfortunately, there were no alternatives, and it actually came down to us having to say, well, if there are no alternatives, we know that the next step would be an elected, cesarean C-section. So that's what we went for. Went down to the theatre, probably 9, 10, 11 people in the theatre, from, the chief surgeon to the anaesthetists to midwives, nurses, theatre staff. And, the operation went fine, but right at the time when, baby was obviously born, total silence in the room. It seemed again like total silence. And
I'm sure,
my wife, Jess, because she's conscious at this time, turned to me and said, is the baby okay? And,
like you could probably just feel that tension in the room, right? Like,
Yeah, there's the first test of faith. You know, where's the baby's cry? And again, time stood
Yeah.
still. It felt like minutes, and I guess it was a matter of seconds. But you know, Jess turned and said, you know, is the baby okay? And there's the first test of faith.
Oh
It's like,
yeah.
yeah, the baby's fine. They're just, you know, sometimes they don't breathe straight away. He's just, you know, getting the help he needs. You know, there were 9, 10, 11 people in the room, all experts, and the baby clearly is getting great care. But then the baby cries, and you know, we're told, you know, we got a beautiful baby boy. We knew that anyway. He's brought over to us after you know, they cleaned him up, etc., and everything
Right.
seems fine at that stage. So, you know, successful you know, cesarean section. I then move with baby to the recovery room while they just obviously finish up you know, stitches and the operation. In the recovery room, the midwife, who was obviously involved in the initial you know, recovery and getting baby to breathe oxygen on his own, was a little concerned that his breathing was shallow,
I see.
and called a pediatrician consultant in to kind of check him out. They do tests as well where it's called blood gases, where they check the oxygen level in the bloodstream. And it
Right.
appeared at that stage that you know, baby Vincent, that's who we decided to call our baby Vincent. So baby Vincent had you know, lacked oxygen before or during birth, significantly enough, and that's where those words came, significantly enough for them to be concerned.
And I'm
And
sure the tension was still felt. You just knew something wasn't.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. So you know, we weren't concerned at that stage because again, we weren't talking trauma at that stage. But then time ticked, and you know, minutes passed, hours passed, you know, and we're you know, maybe 2, 3 hours in now, and they've done more blood gases, and the results are below what they would expect. So
I
baby was
see.
not getting enough oxygen into his bloodstream, and at that stage, we transferred to, you know, the neonatal intensive care in the hospital that Vincent was born in. They did more tests, and then the consultant came to us, you know, with those you know, those serious words. There's potential brain injury. You know, the baby could have brain damage. We don't have the necessary equipment here, you know,
Oh
to
my
deal with
gosh.
them. There is a process which is called a rapid cooling process, where the baby has to be cooled down almost to hyperthermia levels. They really
Right.
cool
So in that
the
moment, could you just feel like what did you experience right in that moment when they're telling you this information? I mean, this is like life-changing information. Did
yeah.
it just feel like
It's
a weight on you, or like what was it?
yeah,
What
it's
was
a
that like?
huge kind of weight. It's you know, because on the one hand we've been given this, you know, something could be seriously wrong,
Yeah.
and then on the other hand, and you have to make a decision. So
Yeah.
you know, and the decision is look, there's this cooling process, but it has to be done within 6 hours. um you know, Vincent kind of meets all the criteria, but we look at the clocks and 4 hours had passed, so we've literally got 2 hours, but they don't have the necessary team or the equipment to do the process you know, at this hospital, so they have to ring around to find another hospital, then find an emergency intensive care transport team to come and
Yeah.
collect Vincent and transport him. And as we're doing all of that, time's ticking. The
Sure.
transport team arrived literally bang on 6 hours, and they got him into the cooling incubator just as we were crossing that 6 hour threshold. So,
Wow.
you know, that can test your faith. And all
Oh, no
along the
question.
way, other than there was a moment where, you know, I literally had tears in my eyes when I think it's when the word brain damage kind of sunk in a little bit. But then, you know, from the outset, I always had this faith that everything would be okay. And why do I
Amazing.
tell this story? I tell this story because, you know, from the theatre, probably 9 or 10, um, you know, surgeons and staff and anaesthetists and nurses and midwives were present in the theatre. Um, the transport team consisted of 6 people who transported him to another neighboring hospital.
So
When he
lots of
arrived
people
at
involved.
when he arrived at neonatal intensive care unit at the neighboring hospital, which was about 25 miles away, I followed on. There was a dozen people in that team, and all along the the short time that he stayed. So there is some positive here, guys. Stay listening. The short
Yeah.
time that he arrived, he had all of these teams of people around him, and never once did I turn to anyone in those teams, from the surgeon who carried out the C-section to the consultants to the transport team, and question their ability to provide a high level of amazing care to baby
Right.
Vincent. I didn't need to check their certificates.
There wasn't time
training,
to do.
You just take it in faith.
Yeah.
That they are great at what they do, and you almost leave it in their hands. So
let's talk about faith. So we've used that word quite a bit. People use that word all the time. People have signs on their wall, that just say faith. And it's like, what is faith? Well, so one of the things, one, criteria for a definition of faith is the Bible says in Hebrews 11:1, it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So, when I look at things like that, I like to break it down a little bit and think about, like, what is substance? Well, substance is a noun, and substance is a thing, right? It's like actual matter. And so, I don't think a lot of people think about faith as something that they could hold in their hand. It seems more ethereal, right? But the Bible is calling it these words. It's saying substance and evidence. When we think of evidence, right, we generally think of like physical evidence, something we could look at or hold or whatever. And so the Bible is making faith something that's very tangible. And so that's one way of looking at faith. And then there's the other idea of like, or the other question of why have faith? Well, I think your experience with your baby is a great reason, of why, because without faith, what would be what would the alternative look like for you, right? I mean, meltdown and panic.
It's unthinkable.
Yeah, make bad decisions. Go emotionally out of control, and then that spins your wife out of control because you're not holding the ground, right? I mean, as men and as fathers, we need to be strong. It doesn't mean that we don't have emotions or feelings or things that we express, but faith is, I believe, one of those things that can ground you and like, show you who you are in these moments of trial. So, and I just want to say real quick, we're getting short on time, but you and I were staying in communication over WhatsApp. And if you haven't listened to us or you don't know who we are, Steve is in the United Kingdom, I'm in the United States. And, so we were communicating over WhatsApp, and I still remember the feeling and the emotion I had when I texted him and asked him how things were going. And I don't remember your exact words, but it was kind of vague, like something's not right, and I had been praying for you. And when I saw that message, I kind of had that feeling of like, oh, it's like, something. And I just kind of immediately went into prayer, but, nor did I come apart. I had faith, and I was just kind of talking to God about like, what are you going to do, God? I mean, here's this young baby in the balance, right? So I was just praying for protection. So faith go ahead.
Yeah, and the same with me as well. It's just I had this overwhelming positive sense of knowing, I'm calling that faith, that everything was going to work out okay.
Yeah, I love that phrase, sense of knowing, right? I think that's also a good way of describing the nature of faith is just a particular knowing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the different kinds of faith. Again, the Bible talks about different kinds of faith. I think that most people would recognize that, just like the language that we use, a person might say, oh, I have faith in this person that they're going to do what they say, or, people can have faith in themselves. And the Bible talks about how, that when we become children of God, that we receive the faith of Christ, like it's something that's imputed to us. So there's different types of faith. And I think that it's really good to understand, in other words, if you're listening to this and you've never really taken the time to analyze your faith, I think that Steve and I's desire would be that you would take this brief little introduction about faith based upon Steve's experience as a, as the impetus to look into your faith and maybe challenge yourself a little bit to grow your own faith or just develop your faith, because it's a grounding tool, I believe, for the rest of your life. And so I guess in conclusion, that kind of ties into that, right? So, I kind of feel like a well-defined faith in yourself, will help you navigate fatherhood, right? Again, your circumstances were a classic example of this. Having purpose and passion as a father, it's hard to do that without faith, right?
Yeah.
All these things tie together. So life has a way of throwing things at you.
It certainly does. Yeah.
And so faith will help you through those things.
Yeah, let me just talk about very, very quickly, because I know we're short on time for this episode. So how did this all end then? So again, I had faith in myself, and that's how I held it all together throughout the process. I had that faith in others, but they had all the necessary training to do what needed to be done. So Vincent was frozen, as I like to say. He was cooled down near frozen and defrosted over a 72-hour period, pumped full of lines and antibiotics, and came through that in amazing rapidness. He just responded so quickly.
Yeah.
He also then had an MRI scan on no brain injury, no severe or major brain trauma or brain damage there, which was completely reassuring. So sometimes you have to have that faith in something beyond yourself or others,
right?
Absolutely. Such as God, for example.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. So we're glad you're here. We're glad you're listening. Our next episode is going to be on autonomy and freedom. So if you're interested in freedom, then be sure to check that out. And Steve and I are both open. If you have any topics that you would like us to explore, please drop us a line. And Steve, where can people find all of our information?
Yeah, so people can find all of our relevant information just on our website, which is simply allieddads.com. So allieddads.com, which is our single point of contact. And of course, if you're watching the video version of this, subscribe and like our channel.
Absolutely. Okay, Steve, thanks for telling your story. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, you too. Great being here. I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Okay, take care.